May you live in interesting times, says an ancient proverb. And what an interesting time must have it been to live in 7th century India. We get a glimpse of this slice of time in Bharat Ek Khoj's episode on Harshavardhana, one of the great kings of India. In the past, I have made videos on history, in particular, references through Bharat Ek Khoj. In keeping with that theme and continued effort, in this video, I will talk about Harsha and 7th century India. To me, 7th century India in general and Harshavardhana's time in particular is interesting. Why do I find them interesting? One of the reasons is that our history at the time was on the cusp of a new age. Historians often refer to this century as the end of our classical age. And with good reason. The cultural history of this period builds upon millennia of cultural evolution, with facets like Kautilya's Arthashastra still intact. Another reason I find the era fascinating is because the rulers were not only strategic military leaders but also patrons of art. Harshavardhana and the Pallava king Mahendravarman were themselves creators of prominent literature. Speaking of Harshavardhana, who had the good fortune to have in his court a celebrated writer, Banabhatta, to chronicle his life, and an equally celebrated Chinese Buddhist pilgrim, Sung, to extol his greatness. The two accounts give insights about the ruler like the two sides of the same coin. In this video, I will speak about Banabhatta and his Harshcharita, a biography of the emperor. As you will see, it is more of a historical romance than an actual biography. The son now born to your majesty shall be the lord of the 7 emperors, bearer of the 7 imperial signs, lord of the 7 oceans, performer of sacrifices of 7 forms, the peer of the lord of the 7 steeds, predicted the royal astrologer Tarak on Harsha's birth. And this is how Harshcharita describes Harsha's birth. Harshavardhana belonged to the Pushyabhuti dynasty of Thanesar, a small kingdom on the right bank of the upper reaches of Yamuna. It was one of the many kingdoms of North India that emerged out of the debris of the Gupta Empire. Harsh's ancestors were chieftains, probably feudatories of the Guptas or the Huns. Their domain, though small, was rich in resources. The Pushyabhuti became sovereign rulers in the 6th century, taking advantage of the political chaos then prevailing in North India. The first ruler of any importance in the dynasty was Harsha's father, Prabhakarvardhana. Prabhakarvardhana had a daughter, Rajashri, and 2 sons, named Rajavardhana and Harshavardhana. Rajashri was wedded to Grahavarman, the Mokhari king of Kannauj, which was situated southeast of Thanesar on the Ganga. This was a significant union for Prabhakarvardhana. The Mokharis were a dominant dynasty and might have once been the overlords of the Pushyabhutis. The Pushyabhutis were always in danger from the Huns. Prabhakarvardhana sent his eldest son Rajavardhana to fight against them. Unfortunately, the prince had to abandon the campaign midway and return home. Prabhakarvardhana had become gravely ill. Rajavardhana needed to be in the capital to handle any emergencies. However, by the time he arrived in Thanesar, his father had died and his mother had performed sati. Banabhatta describes these events with pathos. Just then, a messenger arrived at the court with the news of another calamity, that their brother-in-law, Grahavarman, had been killed in a battle. The combined forces of Malwa and Gauda, erstwhile Bengal, overthrew the kingdom and killed him. Their sister Rajashri had been cast into prison. Now the princes were honor-bound to rescue their sister and defend their kingdom. My pain has vanished before a mere vehement passion, Rajavardhana now declared. He immediately set out against Malwa with his army, leaving Harsha in charge of the capital. Though Rajavardhana routed the Malwa army with ridiculous ease, he himself was treacherously assassinated by Shashanka, the king of God. He lured him with false promises and professions. In the melee, Rajashri escaped. Harsha was embraced by the goddess of royal prosperity, who took him by the hand and forced him, however reluctant, to mount the throne. The young king lost no time in beginning a search for his sister. One of the hermits in forest brought the news of a woman preparing a fire in a remote part of the forest. The woman was Rajashri, who had just prepared her own funeral fire and was about to sacrifice herself. Harshavardhana reached just in time to stop her. He persuaded her sister to live with him as his guardian. At this point, Bana's text ends abruptly. But other sources take up the story from there. Harshavardhana thereafter defeated the Gauda king. He conquered many other territories and ruled over a vast empire. Let's talk about Banabhatta. Banabhatta was the son of a learned Brahmin. His mother died when he was very young and his father when he was 14. Most of Banabhatta's time during these years was naturally spent in a teacher's home, where it was customary for pupils to stay. His early youth after his father's death was spent in sowing wild oats. Although he cherished the company of his bard, goldsmith, drummer, scribe and maidservant, he also had plenty of chances to mingle with erudite academics, noble courtiers, and even the king as he aged. Banabhatta was well equipped to provide a genuine and vivid portrayal of events, thanks to his first-hand experience with people from every social class and his ability to easily enter into the royal chambers. However, it's possible that he might have altered his account to satisfy his patron. He also had the courage to mention unflattering facts about Harsha, but he also had the cleverness to incorporate them into his writing in a way that wouldn't upset his supporter. For example, when describing unfavorable circumstances and Harsha's concern about the impending war, Banabhatta describes the night sky like so. The rising clear-flecked moon shone like the pointed hump of Shiva's tame bull, when blotted with mud scattered by his broad horns. The word Shashanka refers to moon as well as Harshavardhana's nemesis Shashanka, the king of Gauda. Banabhatta thus creates one of the most remarkable word images in his poetry. Banabhatta has been accused by some scholars of writing a biased and therefore dubious account of his life and his patron. But behind the obvious exaggerations and panegyrics typical of the courtly literature of the time, there is to be found a realistic picture of the contemporary life and many facts about Harsha's character and achievements. Some of Banabhatta's descriptions, including his description of king households, campsites, forest, dwelling in Vindhyas, although written with an artificial styling from that era, is still thorough. The works are so vivid and realistic that they transport us to his times. While it's certain that he acquired ample courtly rumors, the overall tone of his writing indicates that the majority of his critical statements are founded on genuine knowledge. Harsha's reign of 4 decades was a brief interlude of relative clarity in the centuries-long period of political turmoil and obscurity in North India. After the collapse of the Gupta Empire, Harsha went from being the king of Thaneshwar to becoming the ruler of the entire north. He was known as Sakal Uttarpath Nath. Even his enemy bestowed him with this title, because Harsha spent more than 40 years unifying the political and administrative systems of this enormous region, making it more cohesive. Whatever the truth of all these claims, there is no doubt that Harsha enjoyed high reputation in his lifetime.